Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. I want you to start by imagining, just for a second, that you're 9 years old again. You're looking up at the two absolute most important men in your life, right? You're looking for guidance on how the real world works. But here's the catch. You quickly realize they are telling you completely opposite things. Now, this isn't just some boring story about numbers in a bank account. No, it's a profound look at the actual habits, the beliefs, and the everyday decisions that literally separate true financial freedom from a lifetime of financial struggle. And we're going to explore this whole thing right through the eyes of a young Robert Kiyosaki, a boy who basically got a front row seat to see how two totally different men approached money, work, and, well, life itself.
But to start us off, we really have to ask ourselves a pretty uncomfortable question. Are you spending your life climbing a ladder that is leaning against the wrong wall? Think about it. Even as a kid, this young boy could see the adults around him looking just absolutely exhausted. He watched them climb this metaphorical ladder day in and day out, putting in literally decades of effort, only to eventually realize their ladder was propped up in the completely wrong place. I mean, why do so many of us work tirelessly, following the standard script of going to school and getting a job, only to end up trapped in this endless cycle of stress and debt without ever actually learning the real rules of money? Well, the answer, as we're going to see, all comes down to what we're taught when we are very, very young.
So our explainer today is anchored entirely in the perspective of that young boy, who is standing directly between two adult role models with radically different financial philosophies. It's honestly fascinating. On one side, he had his biological father, a highly educated guy, tons of advanced degrees, who believed deeply in that traditional path. Job security, put your head down, work hard. Robert called him his poor dad. And not because he wasn't smart or didn't have character, but because despite all those impressive academic achievements, he was constantly struggling financially. Now, on the flip side was his best friend's father. This was a man with very little formal education, actually dropped out of high school, but who eventually became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. He was the rich dad. Just imagine the massive internal conflict for this kid. I mean, who do you listen to when the guy with the PhD is sweating over the electric bill and the high school dropout is out there building an absolute empire? That conflict right there brilliantly illustrates the core dilemma this boy was watching unfold. His highly educated biological poor dad preached traditional job security. He'd say things like, hey, study hard so you can find a really good company to work for. Sounds familiar, right? But his friend's rich dad? He focused purely on wealth creation and financial intelligence, telling him, no, study hard so you can someday own the company. Seriously, imagine hearing that as a child. It completely short-circuits the traditional path we're all spoon-fed. Poor dad was focused entirely on earning money and basic survival, while rich dad had the sheer audacity to focus on creating assets and real generational wealth. So this young boy found himself standing right smack in the middle of these two worlds, forced to choose which mindset he was going to adopt for the rest of his life.
Now, one of the very first major light bulb moments the boy had was about the actual nature of money itself. Rich Dad handed him this brilliantly simple, profound mental model. He basically said, look, wealthy people don't obsess over money. They respect it as a neutral tool. It's literally just like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a beautiful, sturdy house, or you can swing it wildly and smash your own thumb to pieces. Money itself isn't inherently good or bad. What actually matters is the knowledge and the mindset of the person wielding it. Rich Dad pointed out a hard truth. It's actually the lack of money that causes way more misery, stress, and destroyed marriages than the money itself ever could. The goal wasn't to worship the hammer. The goal was to learn exactly how to swing it.
So as the boy grew up and kept observing, he began to see the truly terrifying reality of the adult world. He noticed that people unknowingly trap themselves on this never-ending financial treadmill. Rich Dad called this the rat race. Now frame this through a child's eyes for just a second. To a kid, seeing all these stressed-out adults running on a treadmill to nowhere looks absolutely absurd. They look like giant hamsters in business suits. The boy watched highly intelligent adults fall right into this exact trap, becoming completely dependent on a paycheck without ever stopping to realize that the system was fundamentally designed to keep them running in tiny little circles.
And the mechanics of this infamous rat race, well, they start simply enough. First, you get a job and you earn a paycheck. Cool. Then you get that first promotion. You celebrate. But then, almost inevitably, you decide you deserve the upgraded car, or maybe the bigger apartment, or those countless new monthly subscriptions. Suddenly, your lifestyle is incredibly expensive, which leads straight to step 3. You need more income. So what do? You work harder, you beg for more promotions, or you take on extra hours. More money comes in, sure, but more money immediately goes right back out. Bring this into your own life for a minute. Have you ever felt the friction of this cycle? Earning more simply leads to spending more, requiring you to run faster just to stay in the exact same spot for 40 years. It's exhausting.
Okay, so how do you escape this exhausting trap? Well, the boy had to learn the most profound yet stunningly simple financial rule. This was the massive pivot. This is the single core concept that absolutely separates the struggling middle class from the truly wealthy. While everyone else was entirely fixated on their primary income, their salary, Rich Dad taught the boy to look somewhere else entirely. And the best part? It wasn't about some complex mathematical formula. It was a rule so simple a 9-year-old could easily grasp it. It was a complete, fundamental shift in focus from staring desperately at the paycheck to planting a tree.
And that tree? That's an asset. Rich Dad defined it with absolute, brutal simplicity. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket, period. That's the whole shebang. It's not about what some fancy banker tells you is an asset. Honestly, think of an asset as creating a tiny, robotic clone of yourself that just goes to work for you while you sleep. The rich focus exclusively on buying things like rental properties that produce steady cash flow, stocks that pay dividends, or maybe intellectual property that earns royalties. And why does this matter so much? Because if you stop working tomorrow, your assets keep paying you. They actively work to generate cash whether you decide to get out of bed that morning or not.
Conversely, a liability is simply something that takes money out of your pocket. And here is the tragic mistake most people make. This is the grand illusion the boy realized the middle class was constantly falling for, buying expensive liabilities while falsely believing they are actually assets. You know that shiny new boat? Yeah, it's often just a massive hole in the water that you relentlessly pour money into. A luxury car with hefty monthly payments, consumer debt, expensive gadgets that constantly require maintenance or upgrades. These things silently and visibly drain your wealth. The middle class literally spends their entire lives acquiring these liabilities, dressing them up as assets, and then they sit around and wonder why financial freedom always feels just barely out of reach. So, this brings us to a brutally honest self-audit. I want you to look at your own life right now. Where is your cash actually flowing? Are you accumulating things that push money into your pocket, or things that constantly pull money out? The true, undeniable secret to financial freedom, the one the boy finally wrapped his head around, is using the income from your assets to simply turn around and buy more assets. It's a massive compounding loop. Your little robotic clones go out and buy more little robotic clones. Eventually, the wealth compounds to such a massive degree that your money begins working significantly harder than you do.
But here's the catch. Knowing the logical difference between an asset and a liability, that's just not enough. Acquiring those assets requires a completely new mental script. Remember, to a kid, the monsters are hiding under the bed. But for adults, the monsters are the fear of going broke, the fear of rejection, or the totally paralyzing fear of looking stupid to your friends and peers. The young boy had to learn to conquer those exact adult fears. And Rich Dad didn't teach the boy to be fearless. No, he taught him to be brave while terrified. Because every single successful investor experiences fear. But the defining difference is having the grit to take action despite it.
A huge part of building that bravery involved changing the boy's very vocabulary. He learned that most people encounter a high price tag and immediately just say, "I can't afford it." Rich Dad absolutely hated those words. Saying "I can't afford it" is literally a statement of surrender. It shuts down your brain, it's a lazy excuse to just stop thinking. But asking the question, "How can I afford it?" Well, that triggers a childlike curiosity. It forces your brain into problem-solving mode, sparks actual growth, and shatters your self-imposed limitations. It completely transforms a giant, scary obstacle into a fascinating puzzle that's just waiting to be solved.
And here is the reality. When you try to solve those puzzles, you will inevitably fail. And right here, the boy faced a massive, glaring contradiction. See, school, poor dad's realm, punishes failure, right? Get an F, you're in trouble. But real-world capitalism, Rich Dad's realm, actually rewards those who fail fast, learn, and iterate. Rich Dad taught the boy that failure is absolutely not the opposite of success. It is a vital, non-negotiable part of it. Every mistake contains a crucial lesson. While most people spend their entire lives tiptoeing around, trying desperately to avoid making any mistakes, the truly wealthy spend years aggressively learning from them. The people who eventually achieve massive wealth are simply the ones who figure out how to learn the fastest from their own setbacks.
So the ultimate realization for the boy was that traditional academic schooling, while obviously highly valuable, is really only the very beginning of a much, much larger journey. The danger is thinking your education magically stops the second you walk across the graduation stage. Poor Dad thought that diploma was the finish line, but Rich Dad, he knew that diploma was just the starting gun. True financial education is a lifelong pursuit, demanding constant, relentless curiosity, mainly because money affects absolutely every single area of our daily lives. Seriously, think about the curriculum you went through growing up. You probably learned the Pythagorean theorem, right? Maybe how to dissect a frog, but did anyone ever teach you about cash flow management? Did you have a dedicated class on navigating taxes, asset acquisition, or using debt as a strategy? Yeah, didn't think so. Traditional schools are great at teaching complex mathematical equations, but they almost entirely ignore these absolutely crucial real-world subjects. And this is exactly why highly intelligent, highly educated people so often end up struggling financially. They simply lack the specific, specialized education required to actually navigate the financial world.
As we wrap up this explainer on the mindset of wealth creation, I want to leave you with one final, totally life-changing question. It's the exact same question that young boy had to answer as he looked back and forth at the two fathers in his life. Now, that boy chose to have his money work for him, and it completely changed his entire destiny. So ask yourself, are you working for money, or is your money working for you? Tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off, who are you really going to work for? Thank you so much for exploring this with me. I really hope this shifts how you look at every single dollar that comes your way. Keep learning, keep acquiring those assets, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.